What I want a communist there.
Wow.
Raises.
I don't want an anti-American communist there.
That's what Barack Obama is?
Oh, God, yeah. He's watch a David Horowitz video once in a while.
Okay. All right. So, hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Mindgasms podcast. We're going to do just a short 20-minute discussion with Shane Kennedy and Greg Sandstrom about NewCentre, which is a new platform that we're working on for hosting debates with people and having people comment on them and working towards finding a common ground, basically. So do you guys want to sort of just start off explaining a little bit of the details of what's going to be happening here?
Yeah, I'll just I'll give a little bit of an introduction. So going all the way back, I think 2015, 2016. I don't know if many people are familiar with this phenomenon, kind of the polarization that was going on at the time. I would argue it's accelerated since. So you started hearing people say, using a term like NewCentre to kind of talk about common ground, and from more of like an emotional perspective for myself. Although I do get very animated, I have my own strong beliefs. I do really like reconciliation. I do really like to have discussions across lines, and so NewCentre was originally this process, this event, this amorphous thing, which Greg is going to probably push me on in a bit. But the basic idea was getting people together to practice discussion and finding common ground would be one of the maybe simplest ways to say it. So I had this idea floating in the background, and then maybe before I finish the story, I'll just say let Greg introduce what he's been working on with his Arena blockchain and how he come to ask me if we wanted to do an event for the Zizeck Peterson. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good. We were talking about that, so glad to join you here, Andrew, and a little bit about this new. We don't call it a movement. You're calling it a series of events to invite people, and we hosted the Peterson Zizeck debate before, and this next event will be a follow-up to that. And so the idea of having common ground. So one of the features of blockchain technology is it enables people to find consensus. So to be able to come to agreements due to the way the protocols are built. And so we've been working on a platform that seemed to fit with what Shane was talking about here with NewCentre and getting people interested to actually communicate rather than to have these walls and barriers. And by having a debate where they see sides of a debate motion, a topic, yet at the end, if they can find common ground, and there's a way of leaving that discussion, that debate with a better ending, so they feel like, hey, we're not just fighting here and we're not actually just trying to split apart. We're actually trying to find out things that can be beneficial between people. So it seems that the technology, if it can plug into what Shane has in mind here, then we're glad to join in and come along, see what happens. So.
Yeah, I'm excited to be involved with this. I really like the spirit of what we're doing, and I'm excited to see where this goes and to work on making all of these things happen.
Well, exactly, and I'm really excited that you want to get involved, Andrew, because I had the first event, and part of what we're going to do with this video is we're going to post it on the meetup to kind of give something that people could listen to if they're so inclined. And I think we had roughly like 10 to 20 people show up, mixture of his blockchain meetup and the newer meetup I had started. So what we're hoping to do is, and Andrew might be reaching out to some of the members, and what we're hoping to do is, get people interested. I picked Peterson Zizeck because it's interesting to me. We needed to start somewhere, but I'm hoping to kind of engage some of the people in the meetup and engage some of the people online, such as yourself. There's definitely a future with the Arena blockchain platform. That's the debate platform, discussion facilitating platform that Greg discussed. We'll eventually be able to, well, already does have the functionality to involve people remotely. That's only going to become more true over time. But to bring it full circle, yeah, I'm really excited to have you be involved, Andrew, because kind of getting people more involved in a sense of, what topics are interesting, who would like to, be on the pro side of a discussion, a con side of a discussion, who's more interested in trying to listen to both sides and put forward a common ground. There's part of what motivates me with NewCentre is the idea that people might come to a situation with different values, different points of view. People might want to approach the way they discuss differently, but the NewCentre in part could be a process to allow, through some people debating, some people reaching consensus, some people listening, some people voting through the platform, but through everybody interacting through some type of structure, hopefully we can find a more constructive, some way of constructively talking that's, not a free form discussion, not something as formal as a debate, but something in the middle that hopefully is more fun and engaging. And we hope to kind of prove that out through some of these meetups and through some of the discussions we'll have. So
okay, so yeah, like I love this idea too, and I'm excited to do more work to get people involved and think of topics and all that sort of stuff. And so, and I like this idea too of it being sort of, like you said, like a debate but less formal, but then also not a conversation, like sort of in between a conversation and debate, like sort of a conversation with more of a clearly defined goal for what you want the outcome to be.
Yeah, we've talked also. Some people, when they hear the word debate, they get a little bit sensitive. They think it's like a competition, a war, an intellectual battle of some kind. Some people call it like mental chess or something like that. But
right.
If you'd sort of make it a little less official than some of the sort of organizations, the way they run it, so you're really, based on time clock and all that kind of stuff, very rigid. If you're trying to make it something that's going to facilitate an event where what it requires is people to take a stand, so to clarify their position in such a way that others can grapple with it instead of maybe missing each other. You're like, well, that text is written down there, is that what you want to submit? And now people can respond to it more directly because it's been written down. And with this idea of common ground, a term that we like to use also with finding that consensus is a term that's not used that often, but is consensibility. Can something be consensible? Can there be a consensus found? Because we know sometimes there's topics you're not going to find consensus on a few certain topics if you get people really opposite in the room. But if you can make an effort to try to find something consensible, it seems like the results can be constructive and positive.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That's great. Yeah. Like if that's totally true. Like if sometimes, depending on the person, like you were saying, or depending on the people rather, maybe they won't really be able to reach a consensus, but at least they can maybe sort of start to approach that. So yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, I really did like debating. I found it very, very rewarding. And I mean by debating, I mean like formal debating with scoring and whatnot. Then I remember when I was, when I went through my super into politics phase, and I was talking to other, young conservatives, and they would just kind of take a side of an issue just to keep the discussion from reaching a resolution. It's like, oh well, you might say that most men are stronger, but what study are you quoting? Because you don't have evidence on hand right now, so you can't make that point. And at a certain point, I was just like, well, there's like a dark side of debate where, yes, there's a role for rhetoric, it's a role for persuasiveness as such, but discussing in good faith also has a place, right? So I kind of want it to be more towards the good faith side. But that being said, I think one thing, because it's going to be a little vague for people listening what this platform can do, but ideally what would be happening is as different sides are, like, even if it's multiple people on either sides, you'd actually be able to see the points or at least summaries of what's being said put up. So even if one person might be particularly going for a very rhetorical flourish, that somebody might consider to be a little disingenuous, like maybe they're talking talking like an advocate or a lawyer and not really believing what they're saying, well, maybe that gets reflected in the votes, or maybe that, or maybe that one person might do that, but then when you're generating consensus points on the platform later on that people could vote on as well, that would give you an opportunity to, whatever was said, some people made good points, some people made bad points, some in good faith, some in bad faith, what have you. But at the end, hopefully, some of that can get ironed out when we start generating points of consensus.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's also a good way to structure it too. Like not just basing like whether someone gets more points on what their points are, but how they communicate them, because that does often happen in debates. Exactly what you were saying, people talking like lawyers, and they're being really pedantic and condescending, and there's a lot of animosity toward the other side too.
Yeah, even just the ability to take two different sides, that's sort of the reputation of debate, is that you come in and you're not even sure maybe which side you're going to take. You might flip a coin, or you come in having prepared to argue both sides. On something like this, you're probably going to want to take one side or the other. So the debate motion that we chose last time was, this House believes capitalism makes people happier than Marxism does.
Okay.
So you either had to choose Marxism or capitalism, because that's the way they framed the debate in Toronto. But they didn't really give a very clear title. But if you say we're very much pro-Marxism or very much anti-capitalism, you wouldn't want to argue the other side. However, if it was an official debate in an academic debate or something like that, you wouldn't know which side you would be committed to beforehand. But obviously when we're talking about centers, that's one of the issues, is how do you get people to come to a little bit closer to something that might be agreeable with their opponent, even while making strong arguments. So pro-capitalist is going to say, look, capitalism makes people happier than Marxism, and that was the Peterson position. But still, they were in that debate, which a lot of people didn't call it a debate. The reports, the journalists that wrote after said, no, it's not a debate, because it was a 30-minute speech for each person. And then only after that was it sort of a little bit more back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So that is more like a debate. The first was just speeches.
Yeah.
But in either case, like, they were able to find common ground. They were able to agree about happiness. That was one of the big agreements. So more of that can happen through using the platform.
Yeah, and one thing I'm hoping that you can help us achieve, Andrew, by talking to some of the people in the meetup, and some people who are going to come out to the event, is letting people know, creating some idea of what's going to be discussed. Hopefully, we'll get better at getting the topics out this time, hopefully at least a week early, if not a week and a half early, so people could actually have some time to kind of think about what they want to say. I don't think we want to have a format where anybody's giving big 10-minute long speeches or whatnot, but maybe, you take 1 or 2 points on a side, have, one clear idea you want to put forward. Maybe you've thought about both sides, so you have some preconception of what the common ground might be. So maybe find that sweet spot where we're not expecting you to come with sources or an essay, but you can at least, a reasonable thing to do, be like, okay, here's one solid point I want to make on one side, or one piece of overlap, I think. So at least you have some chance to prepare, because there's that sweet spot between preparation allows for, I think, more productive discussion, but a requirement for too much preparation kind of just, only fewer people are going to be at the table to actually contribute, right? So we'll try to keep it, we'll start with a very minimal amount and see how that goes. So,
yeah, and it'll encourage more participation too if you don't have those super long speeches like you see sometimes happen in debate. Like, for example, you said that happened in the Peterson and Zizeck debate, because most people seem to go to just watch people like face off against each other in debate. Like, it's not, that's one of the things that I find appealing about NewCentre, which is more of this sort of audience or group involvement in this that we've been talking about?
Yeah, I think the way it's set up is we'll have 4 or 5 people per each side of whatever issue or topic can make statements. So we'll go back, do that. Then everybody who's participating will have an opportunity to put forward what they might think is a point of overlap or consensus or a new center. And there's voting mechanisms on all these positions, voting mechanisms on the points of consensus that people have put forward. And then we're going to hope to have 2 to 4 people perhaps present their points of consensus, what has been voted at the top. So ideally, in a reasonable 20 to 30 minute time span for a topic, you could have, 8 to 12 people speak, all contribute, everybody gets to vote, and just have it be a little bit more interactive. And then, maybe do 1 or 2 topics that everybody can unwind by having a little bit of free-form discussion, if there's any mental bandwidth still available to be used, and kind of settle wind down in that fashion. So
yeah, that's a good idea.
And I mean, and this idea of these common grounds, like it's kind of funny because I've always used the word just to kind of like, people often see communism as kind of, and capitalism are at odds, and obviously they are in a lot of ways, right? But one of the happiest points of my life is when I lived on a commune in Israel, right? So it's like, here I am on like a very socialist commune like this. When this they're called kibbutzes in Israel. When it got set up, they literally communally named the kids, and they were communally raised. Okay.
Oh yeah, I remember you telling me about this recently. One of the last times you called me. Now that you mention it, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, they had a common dining, but I mean, I loved it. There was a common dining hall. Everybody came together. Nominally, everybody lived under similar conditions. There's just a huge sense of community there, which was really awesome, right? And then,
but they wouldn't call it communist. It's a commune, right?
Yeah, I would always say, no, it's not communism, it's communalism. It's totally fine. Because it's voluntary, right? Because they had that mechanism. Nobody was forced to stay as part of the community or leave, so you could leave or stay, right? But you weren't, it's not like the state just said, okay, we're all under this umbrella, take it or leave it, or take it or, take it or get in the cattle cart, as it were.
But you're saying they're not as polar as they sometimes appear. There's some even things of common ground.
Well, that's the whole thing, right? Like, and you could have a free system where you could still have a workers' commune. You just don't force everybody to do it, right? You could have a nominally capitalist free enterprise business, but something I've always been in favor of is profit sharing at minimum, hopefully co-ownership if possible. Just kind of set it up under a more voluntary framework, right? I would really hope to see, over the next couple of generations, although a lot of people don't really want to take responsibility, so this might not work, but to the extent that people really do want to own the means of production, there's nothing to stop us from voluntarily setting up our human structures in such a way, right? Where there is an organic co-ownership of things. If that's really a viable thing that's to be desired, if there's something to that idea that has a nominal Marxist sound to it, it should be. If it's that desirable, or why can't we set it up? I would ask. Does that make any sense when I say that? Or
yeah, that makes sense.
I don't want politics to be involved in this in any way, shape, or form either. Right?
I just don't want coercion to be involved in it.
Aha.
Yeah.
Let me, by the way, because coercion was brought up, just bring this short quote, because I brought it up earlier about Jean Vanier, and it seems to ring a bell also with the mission here of the NewCentre. Is a quote. He says, "What is important is helping people to grow to become free."
Right. Yeah, that is a great quote. Yeah.
So,
what does that mean to you in this context, Gregory? How would you tie that back to?
Well, maybe there are constraints and barriers or walls in communication, like political correctness. I don't know if I should say that. I don't know if I should expose myself. Am I taking a risk? Am I making myself vulnerable? And maybe there's a process of becoming more free by being in a community of some kind where your voice is welcome, or what you're there to do is to express your opinion and to also take positions and go back and forth and try to understand other people who have a different opinion on the same topic and who maybe understood it differently, and to check in. Do I understand what you mean when you say this? Are we understanding the same thing? Because otherwise you just talk past each other if you have the same term and a different meaning attached to it. So maybe the freedom of becoming free, helping people to grow to become free partly in this is to unshackle people from some of the communicative chains or barriers or constraints. And but I'm not saying we're trying to create this ideal communications setup like a Habermas or something like that, but maybe it could help in some way to help people feel more free in the way they communicate.
Towards a better incremental approach to improve conversation. Might be a paper title if it was in the 90s.
Like about this reminds me of mixed mental arts too, like creating a place where people can be comfortable to be vulnerable with each other and express your views, but be open to like having people criticize them respectfully in a way where you can talk about each other's ideas and go back and forth and try to maybe find a little bit of common ground, or maybe even like find points on which you can agree to disagree and that sort of thing, which is like, for example, what happens like when we're talking to, like when you and me have talked to each other throughout my podcast here and just texting each other and stuff, Shane, when we've gotten more comfortable with each other, so now like we're pretty respectful with each other and we can talk about things and just get into where we agree and disagree and why and all that sort of thing, and there are no hard feelings.
Yeah, where everybody's a little less threatened and the ego comes up a little less and the defensiveness a little less as well. So
yeah,
it's that process of, I always do like developing a vocabulary with somebody. Like you kind of, because at first I find a lot of conversations you're mapping the territory, you're throwing out words, seeing who's read what and who means what by what words. Gregory talked about that. It kind of takes a while before you start to, okay, I know if I phrase it this way within his framework, he's going to see it the same way as me, so it's definitely a bit of a growing process.
Are we going to do any like breathing exercises or stretching or yoga at the event for centering ourselves? Is that part of the...
Wow. Yeah. I don't know. Would you be leading the yoga session?
Well, I'm just along for the ride. We're providing a technological encounter here.
And Andrew, make sure you ask everyone when you reach out to them if they would be the ones to lead the midway yoga break, or maybe we'll have like yoga mats behind glass and like if things get in case of debate emergency, break glass. And
I could do that virtually too. Wear my hippie beanie and then smoke some weed and say, "All right, guys, time for a yoga break."
Well, in this case, the room where the event will be held, there are 3 big screen TVs on the walls, and then the other wall is filled with 2 whiteboards, and then there's desks and chairs. So I don't think in this case there'll be enough room for the stretching or the yoga. But
dang, my mind had already moved past the whole Peterson Zizeck thing. I was right on to like the possibilities of communal yoga.
I highlighted one part because we typed as much as we could. So stenography, basically watching the debate, listening, and then typing down. And here was one moment in the debate where Peterson said, "I agree with you profoundly. Happiness is a side effect." And Zizeck had also agreed with that as the same thing. And Peterson said, "Happiness is a minor, incomprehensible miracle," quote unquote. So pursuing the good life isn't the same thing as pursuing happiness. I don't know where that will come in. I think Shane is figuring out which topics and in which order to have these things. Creating a kind of an atmosphere for exchange is one thing, and then throwing a ticking time bomb with a very difficult, controversial topic into that mixture is something different. And so we'll have to see what things help people come to centers, what kind of centers they can find, or what's that sort of, it's not just going to be Peterson Zizeck all the time.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. It's interesting too because, you know, pursuing happiness is not necessarily the best sort of goal to go towards. I like that both Peterson and Zizeck agreed about that because it's perhaps not that pragmatic to pursue happiness in a way. And it could be that is, like you said, potentially an interesting debate topic too. Like, what is more worthwhile? What is more worth pursuing? Happiness, or I don't know, something like virtue, or personal success and fulfillment, or something like that, which is perhaps a little similar, but also a little different from happiness, or something like that.
Yeah, maybe we've stumbled onto our one of our topics right there.
I read some reports that said they were surprised that Peterson accepted the topic of happiness because it was more peripheral, as it seems to him, and the focus is more on suffering. Why wasn't it suffering, capitalism versus Marxism?
Meaning.
Sure,
Okay.
sure, or meaning capitalism versus Marxism, but they didn't. The thing is, it was a debate that didn't have emotion. It was just happiness. Semicolon Marxism versus capitalism. So that leaves open the door, I think, for this next event to put in a couple of motions, and it would be great if people could suggest what they would like to debate, because that makes a good debate if you have a good debate motion, and then you can find some kind of common ground when you see, oh, okay, those are the two sides or the multiple sides from this conversation, and then those gems of, yes, I agree with you about this, but I have issue with you about that. So then what you agree with your opponent on is actually something that you've discovered, some content you've created during the course of the event, where now you're like, hey, by the way, we did reach that agreement on that. And even though the other stuff, we still want to go over it again and continue to wrestle with, we did have that, something good to take away from it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what you would look for, I would say, with NewCentre, like trying to find that common ground. Even if it's just a few little things here and there, like you were describing, that's the important point, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe what I'll do too is I'll I'll ask Gregory to open up the sharing of the summary such that anybody with the link can look at it, and maybe we'll go ahead after we get off here. We'll post that onto the event so people can take a peruse at that, and might make it easier for anybody who's made it this far in the video, or anybody who stumbles upon the link, to kind of look through the event and have their eye caught onto something that was brought up without them having necessarily to go back and listen to it all again, right? So that
Right.
would be great.
Yeah.
Speaking of people who are patient enough to make it this far, how's the clock looking there, Andrew?
How's the what? Sorry.
Clock looking there. How long have we been doing this for?
Oh, we've been going for actually almost 30 minutes now.
Okay.
So
Okay,
we could stop here now if you guys want to.
Yeah, I think it's probably a reasonable goal, just to
Just to give a good introduction. I think that's what we
yeah.
did
I think we got a little vague there in the middle. I mean, but what do you want? We are what we are. We're proud of it, and we hope you are of yourself as well.
Flawed people, that's okay.
Yeah.
Happiness, says Peterson, it's like we already agreed on it, something like a grace. Trying to bring that language in with Zizeck, but I think they got to a point where they didn't really insult each other. I think Zizeck said something early on about only idiots think this, but I think my view of the debate was that Peterson was trying to set it up for the second debate by being so welcoming, and it was in Canada, so he played the gracious host. So.
Yeah. One of my favorite things was to watch the video and just Peterson's like leaning over, like halfway over the chest, like ferociously staring at Zizeck, he couldn't possibly be signaling in more ways. He's like totally focused on listening. So that was heartwarming to see. So I think that was great. Is there anything else you'd like to mention there, Andrew, before we sign off?
No, just well, just the standard things I like to do for all of my videos at the end here. So, if thanks to everyone who watches this video, and thanks to those of you who subscribe to my YouTube channel, and to those of you who share this video, and thanks especially to those of you who contribute to me on Patreon. I'll post that the link in the description for this video, like I always do, and I'll also post that link for the blockchain that we were mentioning before we started this there too. And yeah, like I always say at the end of my videos, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all. All right. Keep having mindgasms, everyone. And yeah, you guys got anything else to say? Any last words?
Jesus saves.
Yeah. All right. All right.
Glad to
Thanks.
be here, Andrew.
All right. Nice to meet you, man. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and adios until next time.